Welcome back to the Search Bar Podcast, the podcast for law firm leaders who want smarter growth without the guesswork. Wine optional. I'm Eric Ritter, founder of Digital Neighbor. After 12 years helping firms scale from the inside out, I'm here to share what actually works. Sharper marketing, stronger systems, and strategies built to grow with you. And if you're running a law firm and want more of the right leads, larger retainers, and more cases closed, you're in the right spot. And if you're ready to take that next step with your internet marketing, check out my proven Motion for Marketing system. It starts with a free strategy session, no fluff, just a clear path forward. The link to schedule that is going to be in the show notes. And my favorite part of the Search Bar Podcast is bringing in subject matter experts that can help your law firm grow. Today, we're diving into one of the biggest revenue leaks in law firms, the intake process. You can spend thousands on marketing, but if your intake, when that person calls, when that person fills out the form, when that person talks to you, isn't built to convert, you're leaving cases and cash on the table. I'm very excited for today. I'm joined by Evan Polin, president of Polin Performance Group, LLC. He's a sales coach and a co-author of Selling Professional Services the Sandler Way. With over 2 decades of experience helping professional service firms win more business, Evan knows exactly where firms drop the ball between first contact and sign engagement and how to fix it. Evan, welcome to the Search Bar. I'm so excited for you to be here today.
I really appreciate you having me, and I appreciate those first couple of bottles of wine before getting on here to loosen me up a little bit.
Heck yeah, that's what it's about here at the Search Bar. I know you said you're not too much of a wine connoisseur. I'm a self-proclaimed SEO sommelier where I connect my two passions of search and wine. And obviously, disclaimer, I'm not a professional, but if someone enjoys wine, they want something that they can pair, something to make people feel comfortable, and that just works in a lot of different situations. I like to recommend a Riesling. The white wine originated from Germany, but you can also get really good Riesling here in the States from Washington State. So my recommendation is a Riesling either from Germany or Washington State. It's that balanced sweetness, has that bright acidity, and it just pairs with just about everything. So Evan, that's the recommendation for today. What do you think?
I think it's good, and I think if you recommend that people have a couple of bottles before they listen, they'll even get more out of today's podcast.
I love it. Maybe they can drink along here. So if you guys want to pause it, go to Total Wine and More, get some of that Riesling and listen. You're going to get so much more out of it, like Evan said. But let's dive in here. We're going to talk about where law firms lose potential cases. So obviously my bread and butter is marketing, is bringing in people, making the phones ring, making those forms be filled out. And I like to consult a lot of times and look at the intake process, but I'm admittedly not an expert there, Evan. So really excited to hear about that. You know, we've talked a little bit before about that bad intake process can quietly kill a firm's growth, right? You have that receptionist maybe answering the phone who's having a bad day, you know, or at least that's my assessment from the outside, but you're the expert here. So where do most firms go wrong when it comes to that intake process?
And I think this is a great topic for the two of us to tag team. I can't help at all with how to get the phone to ring, how to get people to the website. But I think that some of the recommendations that I may share today may really be able to help with that increased conversion rate, because there's nothing more frustrating spending all of that time, spending all of that effort, getting things coming in. That's the hard part. And then for the things to leak out the back end, it can be really, really frustrating and really expensive. So for me, I think the first piece, whether you've got receptionist answering the phone, intake specialist answering the phone, attorneys answering the phone, first impressions are everything. I think a lot of times people call us, we pick up the phone, and we don't think about the fact that they could be calling on dozens and dozens of different firms. If we don't give them a really good client experience right from the beginning, if we don't make them feel comfortable, make them feel like we care about what's going on with them, that it's just as important to us as it is to them, it's very easy after that phone call for them to hang up the phone, go to the next firm down on the Google search, go to the next phone number in the directory, and call up that next firm. So whenever you or your staff, anybody's in a client customer facing role, the main key before they ever care to know your expertise or anything like that, do you make them feel good for reaching out to you? Are you making them comfortable? Are you making them feel like they're going to be taken care of? If you don't, it doesn't matter how good the settlements are that you've gotten for other clients. Doesn't matter the level of expertise, how many attorneys you have. If I don't feel like I'm going to be taken care of, if I don't feel comfortable, I'm going to the next firm.
I mean, that makes so much sense, right? It's almost common sense. I think a lot of law firms, and we don't realize like what a big decision this really is for people to make, to choose someone to represent them, whatever the case might be, because we're talking about any law firm here, Evan, right? It's not just personal injury or criminal defense. It can be business as well. I need someone to help me with this business transaction there. And if I'm not treating them the way, they up at the first impression, to your point, that might make them think, well, if they're going to act like this when I call them, I don't want to enter a long-term relationship with them and have to talk to them on an ongoing basis.
Right. If they're not treating me well and I haven't spent money with them yet and made the commitment, how much are they going to take me for granted? How long is it going to take for me to get a return phone call, for me to get an answer to my question once I've retained them? So my clients range the gamut from workers' comp, personal injury, to business attorneys. It's all about the relationship above and beyond anything else. And to whoever's picking up the phone, it may be the 4th, 8th, 12th, 15th call they've taken that day. To the person on the other end of the phone, this was a difficult call to make. Yeah. This is the most important thing going on in my life a lot of times. Again, whether it's a family issue, whether it's a personal injury, whether it's workers' comp, this is the most important thing in the world to me. So if you don't make me feel like it's important to you as well, I will go find somebody else who does make me feel that way, and I'll work with them, because quite frankly, and if you disagree with me, let me know, most clients calling us initially, they don't have the background and the expertise to know whether or not we're good at what we do. They may see an ad online, they may have gotten an email, they may see something, but they don't really know if somebody's an expert or not an expert. All they know is, do I feel like I'm being taken care of? Are they asking me really good questions? Do I feel like I have a path moving forward? That other stuff that we spend so much time on, making sure we've got all the right credentials, initially they don't care about that. They're just going to assume, hey, if I saw something, you're probably a real firm. So now it's, do I think that you can help me?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I want to dig into that a little bit more. As far as on the firm side, right, I might not know that I have a problem, so are there any, maybe if someone's listening here, what are some of the warning signs or way I can maybe diagnose that I have some kind of problem, or that maybe my intake process is broken?
So great question. So a couple of things that may let you know that your intake process is broken. If you're not converting a high percentage of those initial intake calls into the initial consults with the attorney, you know that there's a problem in your process. If you're finding that you've got a fairly high percentage of intakes that were scheduled and people are no-showing those intakes, then you know that either the person taking the call didn't make the person feel comfortable enough, the intake was scheduled too far out, and somebody went and called 2 or 3 other firms because they thought that it was taking too long. So again, if you've got a lot of no-shows for those initial intakes, if you've got people who after the initial call, it's taking them a long time to respond, you're following up with an email, you're following up with a phone call, you're not getting a response, those are a lot of the signs that, there's probably something that we need to do to fix the process. Mm-hmm. And we need to take a much better, much deeper look at what's happening between that initial call coming in and that client either deciding to work with us or not deciding to work with us, or us deciding whether or not this is a good case for us to take on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, kind of auditing the process and looking where, because we do the same as things in marketing, right? We try to figure out, where's the problem? Is it the ad that people aren't clicking on? The click-through rate is low. Is it people are landing there, but they're not picking up the phone? Then the problem's kind of on the landing page. We need to change the messaging there. So it seems very similar here is kind of looking afterwards to figure out kind of where, so we, that slippage is happening and we're not able to get them to become a signed case. It makes so much sense to me.
These days, there's so much technology out there. These should really be data-driven decisions.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be gut feel decisions. We should be able to look at how frequently did the phone ring, how many of those were intakes, what percentage of those actually turned into scheduled first meetings, what percentage of those converted into clients. So you should have the data. It's a matter of looking at that data, seeing where the conversion isn't as high as you'd like it to be, and then figuring out what you need to do to fix the issue, whether it's a training issue, whether it's a process issue, whether it's a personnel issue, and then making the appropriate adjustments.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, just kind of measuring, right? I think a step one, I've talked or had consultation with plenty of law firms where I'll ask those questions, Evan, like, what does it look like? What's your closing rate? Like if someone calls you or, how long does it take to close? And they just shrug their shoulders. They don't know. So I think even kind of that step one of measuring, making sure that you're measuring, shouldn't be taken for granted, right? That's something that you want to put in place if you're not doing that today.
If you don't have the numbers, it's really tough to know whether the changes you're making are making things better or worse if you don't have that baseline and if you don't have that data.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you, as kind of in your role, Evan, do you ever work with intake department? Are there like certain best practices? Should they have certain training? Should they have scripts they're using? Or kind of what are those best practices for someone who's answering the phone, kind of the intake side of things?
Yeah, there's absolutely training that can be done. And a lot of the best practice training is around building rapport, making the person on the other end of the phone feel comfortable, feel like they are being respected, feel like that they're really being valued. So everything from simple customer service courtesy, thank you for giving us a call. We really appreciate you calling in, letting people know, how long it's going to take before we can transfer them to someone or when somebody's going to get back to them, and then following through. There are all kinds of trainings out there on communication style, kind of identifying if somebody detail-oriented, big picture-oriented, and then making sure that you're communicating with them in that way. So there are some easy things that can be trained on so that folks can have more self-awareness. And quite frankly, the one guiding principle that I like to use with this, something that I'll teach whether I'm working with intake folks or whether I'm working with the attorneys on how to convert those, consults into new clients. Growing up, a lot of us learned the golden rule in school: treat other people the way that we want to be treated.
Yep.
That's not the case when we're looking to build a practice. You and I may not want to be treated the same way. I might want things done a certain way. You might want things done a different way. So when it comes to business development and client development, we have the platinum rule, which is treat other people the way they want to be treated. So asking them, how do you want to be communicated with? How can we best help you? And then taking those notes, so that you can pass those notes along to the attorney, you can pass those notes along to, and then doing just what you took down, working with folks the way that they want to be worked with. The other big mistake that I see is a lot of times people feel like they need to have all of the answers up front. People on the phones do too much talking. The better that they are at asking questions, the better that they are at honing their listening skills, the more good information that they're going to be able to gather to pass along to the intake specialist or the attorney. And the more that that client is going to feel like, okay, they're not sticking me in a box. They're trying to understand my special needs, my special circumstances, what happened to me. And if you can make somebody feel that way, there's a very good chance that they're going to want to work with you.
Yeah, just making that almost emotional connection, right? That you understand, you get it. And I really like the platinum rule, right? Because everybody knows the golden rule, treat others the way you want to be treated, but treat others the way they want to be treated is even more important. So I love that. And we kind of started talking about the solutions, right? And I just want to shift into that. So we talked about here's what's broken, here's how to tell what's broken, but a little bit more a high-performing intake process. Evan, in your opinion, what does that look like? What is kind of that gold standard, maybe platinum standard even, that you should strive to have in your law firm?
So the gold standard that firms should have is, okay, really looking at first 30 seconds, first minute, what message do we want to get across? And how do we need to communicate that to the client on the other end of the phone? We need to look at, okay, just strictly bare bones, what information do we need to get so that, one, we can reach back out and contact the client. Two, what are some of the basic pieces of information that the attorney, that the intake specialist is going to need? Making sure that we've kind of got certain steps that your firm, based on whatever type of firm you are, okay, if we're hearing these things, could be a good potential client. This is what we're going to do next. If we're hearing things that are, okay, they somehow got misdirected, we're a family law firm and they're calling about litigation. Okay, what is the script? What are the talking points to, put them on the right path so that we're not wasting anybody's time? And then making sure as a firm, you've determined what's your policy, how quickly do people need to be talked to, how are we communicating that to them so the client always knows what the next steps are, what the time frame is. And I don't like scripts. I like more kind of outlines and bullet points. These are the main things that we need to cover. These are the main talking points. And then have people use their personality and their style. Because the other thing I find, if people are too scripted, the challenge with that is the person on the other end of the phone doesn't have the other half of the script. So if my person is just reading off a script and then they get a question, they're going to get all flummoxed. They're not going to know how to respond to the question. They're not going to act like a real person.
Calling you, Evan, right? And the telemarketer, you interrupt them in the middle and they're just like get completely off track, So it makes a lot of sense to me because nothing bothers me more than when someone calls me and they're just reading off the scripts like, hello, homeowner, da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, oh, man, this is a terrible.
It takes about 5 seconds to realize it's scripted.
Yeah.
And most of us 2 seconds later are tuning out, are hanging up the phone, are mentally moving on. So I think the more that, again, somebody can make a human connection, the better. And that's not going to happen if you've got a rigid script that somebody needs to read off of verbatim.
Yeah, no, and that makes so much sense, right? So to me, that almost sounds like that's training, right? And repetition and just kind of having, practicing that with someone so that they get used to being able to have the bullet points, to your point, right? The framework, but not have it scripted out.
Exactly. And really important, the other thing that's really important for firms, a big pet peeve I hear, you need to make sure that you're capturing all of the information that you take. Because if I'm calling and talking to an intake person, and then I get on the phone with the attorney, and I'm getting the same 6 questions that I've already answered, makes me feel like they didn't pay attention, they're not listening, and I may want to talk to someone else. So make sure that you've got a way to get that information on to whoever's doing the next step.
That handoff is so important, Evan, like you said, right? Because there's nothing worse than that. You call your bank and you complain, it's like, and then, okay, I need to hand you off to someone else. And it's like, okay, you got to start from scratch here.
Right.
Now you want to know my account number again. You want to know the problem again after I just talked to someone for an hour. It's a horrible experience. We've all been there before.
Right.
So that's a good point. So one thing I did want to ask here at this point, though, is you talked about, having clear standards and talked a little bit about automation earlier. And I'm curious, how does automation play in here? Like what can be automated? What should be handled by a person, by a human here? Where is that line?
So for me personally, and some may disagree, that human interaction needs to be person to person. So when we're having a conversation, I don't want to take somebody through an automated list of questions or those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. So that needs to be a human to human kind of contact. Some of the automation I want within the office, if the main person isn't there, then it immediately transfers to someone else's line, and it immediately transfers to somebody else's line so that that person is getting handled and it's not just a voicemail. And if they are getting a voicemail, that voicemail is letting them know when somebody's going to get back to them. I think some of the standard follow-up, the email reminder that we've got the appointment coming up, the confirmation of the appointment. Yes. If somebody no-shows their intake, then putting them into like a 3-step follow-up process to try to get them reconnected. Those are the things that should be automated. The gathering of the information, the person-to-person kind of thing, that really needs to be a real live person doing those kinds of conversations.
Love it. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit more about training. I know I kind of asked about that, but I just think that's something, that our listeners can really benefit from, is understanding how to help you win more cases, right? Because I think that's so important, that intake team is that linchpin in the agency, and you can put the systems in place, but even with the best systems, things can break there. So kind of, if you could just talk a little bit more, maybe, I don't know if you have with firms that you work with or kind of the best practices there, but how can you really create that internal team? Or even if it's the attorney maybe answering the phone, like what is the best way to have a team that is ready for action and constantly converts callers to signed cases or retainers?
So, great question. So for firms who have the systems where their calls are recorded, I think that someone listening to the calls, whether it's the managing partner, whether it's another attorney, if you have a really large team and you've got an intake supervisor, whether you're bringing in an outside training firm like mine and you've got somebody from the training firm listening. But I think there's nothing better than auditing real calls to hear what's going on in real time, to find out on a really busy day when the team's really stressed, are the calls still being handled in the same way as they are, 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning when it's the second or third phone call that somebody has taken that day. I think ongoing reinforcement is really important. If you go in and teach somebody a concept once and never reinforce it, people are just going to fall back to their old patterns, their old behaviors. These are skills that can be learned. They're not one-time talking points that you go through. So whether you're having staff meetings and doing it in staff meetings, whether you're doing it in trainings, these should be things that should be constantly reinforced so that people are developing the skills, even something that we do well. If we stop doing it for a while, Eric, I know that you're a golfer. If you stop practicing for a while, if you stop working on your swing, you're going to revert back to what it was before. It's the same thing with intake skills.
Yep. Yeah.
You need to make sure that you are working on those skills, honing those skills, seeing what can be made a little bit better, and continuing to iterate on that.
Love it. And you had me at golf, so now I'm actually paying attention, Evan. So thank you for that. But I think it's just like everything else in life. It comes down to those repetitions, right? Being good at free throws is you're throwing 1,000 free throws. That's how professionals are so good. Let me throw you a little bit of a curveball here. What about a price shopper or someone who's like asking, like I call Evan, you pick up the phone. I'm like, hey, I'm going through a divorce. How much is that going to cost me?
I might say, I appreciate the question, and we need to get into your case a little bit more. Before we get into what our fees are, how much is it going to cost you if you don't hire the right attorney? Are you more concerned about what the hourly rates are and what our fees are? Or are you more concerned about getting a fair settlement at the end of the day? If you're looking for the cheapest firm, you'll be able to call other firms and find people that have cheaper rates than ours. But is that, what's going to have a bigger impact? What you're paying per hour or how the overall settlement's going to end up?
I didn't even have a follow-up to that, Evan. I was going to try to poke holes in that, but that was like, I print that response. I think that was great.
So when I'm working with PI firms, workers' comp firms, oftentimes, again, I'll get what do I do? Somebody comes in and says that this firm's promised them $10 million for their broken pinky. And again, I'll have them use different questioning techniques, but basically say, geez, Eric, would you rather work with a firm who's going to tell you what you want to hear so that they can get the case and then have you be really disappointed with the outcome? Or would you rather have a professional walk you through what you can realistically expect and then make a decision based on that?
Yeah. What about if I also hear a lot of times they want to talk to an attorney right away, right? So just like a price shopper, there's someone like, Evan, I don't even want to talk to you. I just want to talk to the attorney. Why can't I talk to the attorney?
That's a great question. Our attorneys have their dedicated time once we've gone through the intake to make sure that we're putting the right attorney with the right client. And the attorneys are scheduled throughout the day. And just like if you were meeting with one of our attorneys, we wouldn't want your meeting interrupted because a call came in. We're not doing that to the clients that our attorneys are currently meeting with. So here's our process. If that doesn't work for you, completely understand. And if you decide you want to go to another firm, that's fine. Because out of role play for a second, if somebody's going to be a major pain right from the beginning, the firm's probably going to be sorry that they took on that person as a client down the road. And if they're not willing to follow my process from the beginning, then
no, that makes so much sense. And I've worked with PI attorneys that actually have attorneys, like junior attorneys working the intake department, kind of those entry level. Do you see any value in that, or does it matter like what kind of education maybe that person has in intake department?
I think if there's a lot of leakage, that can be a good solution if you're a firm that has the bandwidth. There's one firm that I worked with, and what they would do is on a rotating basis, have attorneys available. So if somebody wanted to talk to an attorney right away, or it seemed like a really good, really ripe case, there were one or two attorneys who were just doing work in their office but weren't meeting with clients, weren't going to be on the phone, so that they could take that if it needed to be escalated. So if you've got a large enough firm where you've got the bandwidth to do that, that can be a really good best practice.
It doesn't really seem sustainable to me. So there was a law firm here locally, and their ad was callmeonmycellphone.com. I'm always going to pick up. It was one attorney, right? And I never called, but every time I'd see, I would question it. Like, I like the idea in theory, but that just doesn't seem sustainable.
How successful can that attorney be?
Right.
If that attorney is constantly ready to pick up the phone?
Right, exactly.
So, and are they going to change their ad when they've got 5 clients and now they don't have the bandwidth to pick up the phone?
So the ads don't run anymore. So I think it was a great gimmick for the time that it ran. And I was like, that's from a marketing standpoint, great idea. But from a actual practical standpoint, horrible idea.
Right. So again, you need to be a firm of a certain size. You need to be an 8, 10, 12 attorney firm. Where you can have one or two of the more junior attorneys be made available, twice a week for a 2-hour time frame and just kind of alternate. But again, you need to be a firm of a certain size to be able to start to adopt that model.
No, absolutely agreed. So I don't want to end the episode without going through your checklist. So I'm really excited to go through the closing checklist here. Evan, 5 ways to stop losing cases at intake. So I'm going to run through these. Would love for you to add a little bit more context to each of these.
Absolutely.
So there's 5 of them. So I'm going to get started. And I'm already excited about number one. I think it's great. Number one, respond to all leads within 5 minutes.
So really important to be very responsive, because if you haven't built the relationship, firm one didn't pick up, let me go to firm two, let me go to firm three. That doesn't necessarily mean that they need to talk to an attorney within 5 minutes. But if somebody, an intake specialist, receptionist, picks up the phone, says, hey, really appreciate you calling in. I'd like to schedule a time for you to talk to our attorney, or our attorney is going to call you back between 2 and 3 o'clock this afternoon. Does that work for you? As long as somebody feels like they're being taken care of, I find they have a little bit more patience. But if they just send an email, don't get a response, call in, get a voicemail, don't get any kind of response, they're going to move on to the next one. So they don't necessarily need to be on the phone with somebody in 5 minutes. They just need to know that they're being taken care of.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great even customer service point, is people just want to feel like they're being taken care of, that, the person on the other end is thinking of them, right? And isn't just, disappearing and forgot about them.
Right. And is meeting the urgency in the way that the client perceives the urgency.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So I love that rule. Respond to all leads within 5 minutes. Number two, use a consistent tested intake script.
So, and we talked about this a little bit before, I would just insert the word outline in terms of script. Mm-hmm. Let's have a sense of the questions that we need to ask, the information we need to get, where we want to take the conversation. Again, I have set up for firms in the past where at the top of that outline, it says, make the client feel appreciated. Thank them for calling it. So again, giving people some of those prompts, but it really should be an outline more than a script.
No, absolutely. And I'm glad we went over that earlier. It makes so much sense, kind of what that needs to look like for the intake department. Let's move on to number three here. Build rapport before asking detailed questions.
If the client's not comfortable with you, the chances that they're going to share the details of what's going on, or the chances that they're going to be honest with you, aren't very good. But if you make them feel comfortable, if you thank them for calling in, let them know that you really appreciate it. Let them know that you're here to help. Let them know that you want to ask some questions, want to see how we can best help, how we can get them to it. Those are the kinds of things that are going to then get somebody comfortable enough to share with you what's really going on.
Yeah. Just like, you're offering them a nice Riesling, right? Something that makes them feel comfortable with you, before, you hammer them. And I'm saying hammering loosely here, right? With those questions, makes so much sense.
Yep.
Love it. So let's look at number four. Number four is clearly explain next steps and secure commitment.
So again, nobody wants to hang up the phone not knowing when they're going to hear from somebody, not knowing what's going to happen next. So we need to make sure that we are clearly communicating what the next steps are from our perspective. But the other thing I want to do is make sure I'm getting the commitment for the client. Hey, if I'm having Eric reach out to you at 2:30, is there anything that's going to keep you from picking up the phone? Anything that's going to keep you from jumping on that intake, from keeping that appointment? Not only do we want to make sure that the client feels like they've got clear next steps, but I want to also make sure that I'm getting that client's commitment, that they are going to be there, they're going to show up for that intake, send in the paperwork, whatever we need. And I find that if I kind of set those clear next steps, if someone doesn't follow through, we may end up not taking the case and disqualifying more quickly if we don't think it's going to be a good fit. But oftentimes, if people know what the next steps are, know what the expectations are, there's going to be a lot less chasing, a lot less need for follow-up. Everybody's going to be on the same page, which is going to make things just run a lot more smooth.
Yeah. And back to the automations, right? There's so many ways to automate that. The follow-up messages, the text messages, the emails to everyone. So there's no excuse to not communicate.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So let's go to number five, last but not least, and this makes my my marketing, data-centric marketer's heart beat a little bit faster is because we want to review intake calls weekly to identify improvements, right? So we want to make sure we're measuring and then looking at what's happening.
Absolutely. On a regular basis, once a week, we should be looking at how many inquiries are coming in, what percentage of those turned into intakes, what percentage of the intakes turned into new engagements, looking at where the drop-off is, are numbers getting better, numbers getting worse, auditing some of the calls. But if you don't have data, you don't have anything. So you need to be tracking that on a regular basis, and there needs to be somebody responsible for that within the firm.
Makes sense. And I think you said something really important there is have an owner in the law firm, right, who is responsible for this as well. And everything needs to have an owner.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, that was such a great checklist. I really want to say a huge shout out to Evan. I learned so much. I'm going to have to go back through this podcast and make sure all of these items are being followed by the clients I'm working with, and making sure, to share this with clients in the future, because I think it was so much great info. So Evan, thank you so much for breaking down how law firms can stop losing good cases before they even start. Before we wrap here, can you share where listeners can connect with you, learn maybe more about Polin Performance Group, and maybe do you have any resources on intake conversion for listeners?
So sure, and based on what you shared before, I won't give out my cell phone number and say that I'm guaranteed to pick up no matter how many people call, and no matter when people call. Couple good ways to reach me. You can email me. It's my first name, EVAN, at Polin, Polin, PG for performancegroup.com. So email me at evan@polinpg.com. You can go to my website, which is polinpg.com. On my website, there are all kinds of blog posts on there, everything from intake and building rapport to asking questions, getting clear next steps, having a really good elevator pitch. So there's 15, 20 blog articles. I invite you to go to my website and look at some of those. And I just really appreciate you having me on the episode today.
Thanks for being here. We'll put all that in the show notes as well, so that way people can see that in the description to the show notes. And if you're ready to dive more into marketing to get more retainers, more cases via your internet marketing, book your free strategy session with me to get started. And I'll introduce you to my proven motion for marketing system. Link's going to be in the show notes as well. And if you enjoyed today's episode, share it with a colleague, leave a review. It helps more firms learn the strategies that actually work. And as a reminder, today's wine that pairs nicely, makes people feel comfortable, and follows the platinum rule, right? It's not just what you enjoy, but what a lot of other people will enjoy as well, is a nice Riesling, either from Germany or Washington State, with the balanced sweetness, that bright acidity. It really pairs with just about anything, in my opinion. From spicy Thai food to sushi to barbecue, it's your go-to. And that's it from the search bar, everyone. Cheers. Until next time, remember, respond fast, listen well, and keep building a practice you love.